Hey, I'm Zac.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth
on Now You Know.
Sponsored by EcoWare.us. Start positive conversations with carbon-negative products.
And we're brought to you by ABetterRoutePlanner.com. They just unveiled their premium version, and you can get a 30-day free trial of it if you use our referral code down in the link below.
And we're sponsored by our friends at the solar-powered hotels in Schaumburg, Illinois. That's right near Chicago. The Fairfield Inn and Suites by Marriott and the Town Place Suite Hotel right next door. They're both connected. They both have solar power, and they both have EV charging.
So this week, we were lucky enough to have you interview Mark Frohnmayer, who is the president of Arcimoto.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody that we are not financial advisors. We are long on Arcimoto stock, but you should not take our advice. You should do your own research. So here it is, my interview with Mark Frohnmayer. Hey, Zac here, Now You Knowers. We're on Now You Know with my friend Mark, who is the president of Arcimoto. And the first thing, Mark, before we get started, I want to thank you because when we were in Austin, Texas at Fully Charged Live, you let Jesse and I drive around Austin in an Arcimoto, and we had the time of our lives. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, it's certainly an experience. And even in these days of effective quarantine, it's actually a really nice break to be able to rip around town on grocery runs in the FUV.
You know, that's a really interesting point that you bring up. I don't know about you, but like I've been going on a lot of walks and a lot of bike rides and stuff because it helps to just get us out of the house and stuff. But what's nice about the Arcimoto is that when you're in it, you don't feel like you're in a car. You feel like you're connected to the outside world. And so I've got to imagine if the world was full of Arcimoto FUVs and we were passing our friends and each other, it would just feel we'd be way more connected. We wouldn't be in these like metal boxes where we feel like we're just disconnected from the outside world.
That's an experience that we've certainly had and that we've a lot of our early customers have reported is just it's a much more social experience with the world around you. And one of the things that we're experiencing now is just really clear skies. And so you can start to envision what the world's going to look like when there aren't a ton of gas burners on the road.
Yeah, I mean, as hard as it is to be positive during this time, there is a lot of good news coming out about the environment and how now with no cars on the road, we've got clean air. And if you start to do the math, you start to realize there's so many people who are hurt by pollution, we just don't count it. And so therefore, no one's really keeping tally of it like we are with, the double plus bad cold.
It's one of those things that, we've just sort of accepted it as part of the way the world is. But I think now that my hope is that one of the things we are able to take away from this time is a memory of what the sky is supposed to look like.
Now, on your latest earnings call, you talked about the launch of the Deliverator, which was really exciting to see. And you're seeing it now on screen. The Deliverator is basically a fun utility vehicle with the ability to put stuff in the back. Can you tell me more about that?
The goal of the company as a whole, of the platform, is to really look at how we use cars today and provide solutions that are much, much more efficient. And one of the things people obviously do, aside from just transport themselves, is delivery of goods. Although, you can, I think of the Deliverator as actually applying to not just actual delivery, where you're getting groceries or pizza or parcels or whatever, but actually just a huge number of fleet trips, corporate fleet trips where you need some storage. And this could be, the city of Eugene, for example, has talked about using one for parking enforcement where they carry stuff around. You could use it for doing gardening. You could use it for tools to go to a job site. It's really, it's the utility version of the Arcimoto platform. What is really differentiates the platform itself from other small form vehicles is that for a vehicle its size, as the FUV, it can carry two big guys very comfortably. And what that means is that when you just have one occupant, you actually get quite a lot of storage. I think at last measure, it's somewhere around 23 cubic feet of storage on the platform in that delivery back half, which is enough for, a giant load of groceries or a bunch of parcels or, boxes and boxes and boxes of pizza.
Now, did I see something in your filing that talked about that you're in talks now with a grocery store or a chain?
One of our very first pilots, actually our first major external pilot, is going to be with a major nationwide grocery chain. And we're putting the finishing touches on those vehicles right now in our R&D center, and those are going to go ship out, we think, probably somewhere around the end of the month to get put into a couple month field trial specifically for grocery delivery.
Because you've mentioned this on your latest video, during this time, it's more important than ever that people get deliveries, and the Deliverator, the FUV, is perfect for that.
What was sort of like a real convenience feature 6 weeks ago has become a critical component of health and safety for people who can't, sort of get out and go into the real world to go do their grocery shopping. If you're in any kind of a compromised, immunocompromised, or at-risk population for COVID, it makes a lot more sense to have what you need come to you. My sense is that even once we're outside of this immediate crisis, which could go on for quite a long time, that transition will have been made. That is, that people will say, wait, why do I spend, you think about your average grocery mission being going to the grocery store, finding parking, getting all your stuff, waiting online, getting back in your car, dealing with traffic, coming home. Lot more convenient to just have it show up at your doorstep.
Now, in the Deliverator that we've seen kind of prototype images of before, it looks like it looked as if there was like some kind of box on the back. But this latest images that we're seeing, it seems like you've gone in a slightly different direction. Have you finalized it yet?
Well, what we decided was ultimately that we didn't want to have to recertify the frame, and we didn't want to have to redo a bunch of the compliance work that we'd already done. Plus, I mean, one of the real advantages of both the Deliverator and the Rapid Responder is that they're built on the same production line as the FUV. And in fact, I mean, if you really think about it, they're almost just FUVs with some slightly different options at the very end of the process. So although we sell them as distinct product lines, there's a huge degree of commonality of parts between all of our product offerings. And that makes them all additive to scale, so that we're buying the same motors and controllers and batteries and building the same underlying chassis. And so ultimately that really factored in as we looked at turning it into a product. Do we want to make a separate box, or do we want to just skin the frame that we've already got? And it made a lot of sense to just use what we already had. And I think ultimately it looks cooler, it's sleeker, it's got better aero performance. So there are reasons to proceed on that path in any case.
Now, the Rapid Responder was really cool to see in your video when you talked about the Rapid Responder. You're now testing it in the city of Eugene with the fire department, and your fire chief seemed really excited about it. Can you tell me about his experiences so far?
Yeah, I mean, we've been actually really blown away by the positivity of response from our local crews. And I think they have been looking for a long time at how do we have a smaller footprint response to emergencies and for paramedics and so on. They had explored motorcycles back in the day, but just found that they couldn't get the gear that they needed. What it's seeming like is that the Rapid Responder is really hitting a sweet spot for them in terms of carrying capacity and functionality, and also speed of delivery. And it really, again, it just sort of all goes back to that same platform thesis, right? That it is a small footprint vehicle with an uncommonly large amount of carrying capacity for a small form vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, in the video that you showed, it was really interesting, and your fire chief mentioned this, that your city, a lot of cities, not every road is wide enough for the typical ambulance or fire truck to get down. And there's lots of campuses and city streets that are laid out, especially if someone's double parked or whatever. I mean, I've seen this a lot. I grew up in Boston, and basically, I just have memories of double parked cars getting just like torn out of the streets so that the fire trucks to get by. You have one misparked car and you've blocked the entire fire department from getting to the scene of an emergency. Whereas with an Arcimoto, you can zip around pretty much anywhere and get where you need to go fast.
When we first started thinking about it, we were actually in New York City and watching ambulances get stuck behind crowded streets, and actually ended up running into a guy randomly at a restaurant who had invented an ambulance motorcycle. And he overheard us talking about this and said, that platform would be perfect for emergency response. So we originally sort of conceived it for really high density, high traffic areas where the benefits of the platform, and you guys have driven it around New York City, you understand you really can get places you would never be able to get in a car type platform. But then come to find out, when talking with our own local fire officials, one of their real challenges are just all the bike paths in town and getting into crowded sporting events and things like that. So it really serves multiple purposes in getting through high density areas to get to an incident faster.
Now, right before this whole worldwide pandemic happened, you guys had hit a production of 2 units per day, which is, first of all, congratulations, because the fact that you have gotten to, I think you beat Tucker, which I guess was one of your internal goals. So congratulations. And then unfortunately, everything came to kind of a halt. But you were about to hit 3 per day, I think.
The plan was to do 3 per day the week of the 26th of March, and we paused production at the end of the week right before. So, I mean, that was the one goal for the quarter that we didn't achieve. But ultimately, we just said, we can either push forward and hit this goal that we set out, or pay attention to the health and safety of our team. And ultimately, that was not a very difficult decision to make. But the scaling process, going to anything above 0 per day, obviously is a major milestone in any vehicle company. Just because even getting to the starting line of production for a new vehicle is a fantastically difficult task. And you can see that with basically everybody who's tried and all of the EV startups that began around the same time we did. Of all of those, the only 2 who made it to that starting line really are Arcimoto and Tesla. But it is a tough job to get to the beginning. And then the next step is obviously bringing that from 2 a day up to real scale. So that's we were on a nice progression. We were going to shooting for 3 a day in March, and then ultimately 4 a day in this quarter. But we're taking this time to actually just plan out the next big jump of scale.
That brings up a really good point. You mentioned Tesla. Tesla is my #1 stock holding. Right close behind it is FUV. And when people come up to us all the time, Jesse and I, and ask, what stock should I get into for this, great new world that we're getting into of electrification? We talk about Tesla all the time. I talk about the fact that you just mentioned it. What other electric car companies are out there doing this 100% electric? And Arcimoto comes right to the top of the list because that's what you're doing. And you've gotten past a bunch of major hurdles. You've spent over a decade finalizing your product, getting it to production, and now you've got a backlog of over 4,000 orders, which is no small feat. So I'm going to talk about some of the big questions that get asked of us from either would-be investors or people who are kind of kicking the tires on FUV. And I'm going to be a little tough on you here. So one of the things we hear a lot is, okay, it's this 3-wheeled vehicle. It looks kind of weird. I don't know. I've never driven it. But one of the things that Arcimoto is trying to do is to get it into rental space, right? Into, places like Florida. You've got it in Key West right now. And people have been surprisingly negative on that idea. They've been like, I can't picture that. Can you paint the picture of what this looks like?
Yeah, and we did actually, we signed our first rental franchise in Q3 of last year down in Florida. We shipped them their first set of vehicles before the end of the year, and they started operating and started renting vehicles in Q1. They've likewise, suspended rentals at this point due to COVID. But they are incredibly enthusiastic. They had days where they were fully subscribed on rentals. I would say comparatively, a couple of data points. The reason we went after the rental market in the first place was because we would hear on the street over and over and over, people will roll down their windows and say, where do you rent that? Where can I rent that? That looks like a ton of fun. That looks like a great way to see this city. I want to try that out. So the idea of doing rentals actually was something that came to us from the market itself. And then when you look at sort of the comparative landscape of product, think about anywhere that's, in Key West, they're renting golf carts for $175 a day. You can rent in various places the Polaris Slingshot or the Can-Am Spyder or a Harley. We really look at this as like sort of the Sea-Doo of the road. So if you're looking to go, if you're on the water, you can rent a stand-up paddleboard. That'd be like a bicycle. You can rent a speedboat. That'd be more like a sports car. This is in that sweet spot in the middle. where it's incredibly fun to drive. You can see all around you. It's great for tourist destinations. And then that experience, we think, once you've actually had a chance to drive it for a half a day or a day, that you'll be inclined to want to have one in your own driveway.
I think that's a really good key point. It's butts and seats for me. Basically, when I saw it, I fell in love with the look of it. But then when we got in it, we got to drive it around New York. We got to drive it around Austin, Texas. And it's just so much fun. And then, as you mentioned, you're driving along, and every single time you stop, people's heads turn and people yell out like, "What is that?" And they're taking pictures of it and they're asking you questions. So it's a lot like, to me, the Tesla experience, where no one's heard of it at first. Then they see it in someone's driveway or on the street and they ask a question or two. Maybe they go for a ride and then they're converted.
My mom recently she was actually our very first pre-order customer, put down her deposit back in 2009. But she expressed that she was just blown away by the positivity of response on the street. People asking about it, people taking pictures of it, people wanting to know, more about the brand and more about the product. And I think the videos do a bit to capture the experience of the vehicle, but it's been very hard for us to capture that piece of it. It's really, once you actually drive it in a place where there are people, you realize, oh, this is not a niche perception product. This is something people look at and a wide spectrum of people go, oh, that looks like the thing for me.
I think a lot of people think that this has to take off in the same way as a sedan or a pickup truck would take off, in those same numbers of millions of units. And what I've tried to tell most people is that, first of all, any company when they're first starting are not going to be making millions of units. Just look at Tesla. But secondly, for this to be successful, I don't think you need to sell millions of units, although you could. I was just looking the other day at, for instance, the rapid responder. There's tens of thousands of fire departments across the country. Right. So if it was successful even in that market, you'd be busy building them for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers thing is an interesting question. There are 51,000 fire stations in North America, and that's just fire. That's not talking about EMS or law enforcement or campus security or any of all of those applications that we see as a market for that. Then there's the consumer vehicle. Then there's last mile delivery. All on the same platform. And so the question is really, what does it take to make a success? Our near-term vision of success is 10,000 units a year, right? Which is a modestly successful golf cart. But when you start looking at the numbers that other groups, Harley's selling 250,000 motorcycles a year, Polaris is selling 325,000 ATVs a year. So the numbers for even, sort of fun type vehicles far eclipse what we're looking at for Arcimoto. I think, and 10,000 units a year, that certainly builds a successful company from financially from where we are today. If you just think about the market cap of what is a company that's doing $200 million a year in annual revenue on vehicle sales, it should far eclipse where we are in this moment. Our metric for success is, are we making a substantial impact on carbon emissions over the long haul? So our sights are set considerably higher when it comes for what we want to see out of the platform and its successors.
Now, I think the stock price of FUV scares a lot of investors. When a stock gets low like it has lately, I think a lot of people are like, oh, there must be some reason for this. I've been telling people, and again, I'm not a financial advisor, so don't take my advice, do your own research, but I've been telling people that sometimes when something gets cheap, it's because it's a steal, and you might want to look into it. If you look at the value of this company, the fact that you put this much time into the company and you built up the production and you've got the orders, I'm like, to my math, this looks like a steal. But what do you say to those investors who are like, gosh, it's been almost, the stock's been almost delisted. It's kind of cheap. Like, are they going to go under? What's going on?
We haven't been at any risk of being delisted. Our only warning that was on the stock was just because we had a director resign, and so that seat's now been filled, and we're back in full compliance. But I think to the bigger question, one, I've been encouraged by the response in the market since our latest earnings call, where we sort of laid out what we've done and the road ahead, and the response in the market has been fairly immediate. The other thing I guess I would add is that I am not a certified financial analyst, so I'm not going to pretend to give advice in this regard, but we are covered by a number of different analysts, professional analysts, some who've covered the clean tech space for decades, and all have price targets that are way north of where we sit in the market today. Like many in the stocks in the microcap market, we got severely beaten up in the lead up to the COVID crisis, and how we do going forward and our ability to achieve the milestones that we've laid out should have an impact as well. But we are in production, have a production vehicle in the marketplace. We have a large backlog of pre-orders, nearly 4,300, I think, at last count, that have grown almost entirely organically. And we now have our fleet pilots on the road to go after what we think are even larger markets still. When I look at our value today relative to where we were a year ago, I think we are so much farther down the road towards true success. And yet the stock isn't anywhere close to where it was even a year ago. So does that mean it's a buying opportunity? Again, I'm not going to offer advice, but I am certainly as bullish now as I have ever been on Arcimoto's prospects.
Now, what's it like to go from all the years of research and development to now production, where you've got to get the cost of the units down? What I hear from a lot of would-be investors is, yeah, but are they making money on each unit? And it's like, no, not yet, because they're in low production. But as every month goes by, they're getting their costs down so that they're going to get their margins up. Am I right in that basically you need to work through that until you get to a margin?
We've had about on the order of a 20% reduction in cost of materials since we launched production. And that's, over the span of the first 100 vehicles. The challenges of your early vehicles are, one, you're buying all your parts in low volume, which you don't get any price breaks on. Two, you're building them at the most inefficient way that you will ultimately end up building them over the span of the production cycle. And then three, you've got a lot of work still to do in terms of value engineering and actually driving cost out of the design. And so the nice thing about moving in, getting into production is that it allows us to just focus squarely on cost down, scale up. I am, our engineering team has said literally that, this is a quote, that they are tripping over low-hanging fruit in terms of cost reduction opportunities. What gives me comfort there is just that the vehicle has been architected from the very beginning to be able to get to a low cost. And we see that now as certainly our very highest engineering priority is just coming down the cost curve.
Now, when we were in Austin and we were driving around talking to a lot of people at Fully Charged Live, I was surprised that one of our biggest questions was about the sides. There's no sides on the vehicle that we were driving. And they were like, are there going to be sides? Because I want sides. And I was first like, do you really want sides? Because if you could drive this, you'd realize it's really fun without them. But to those people who might be wanting sides for whatever reason, is that something that's going to be an option?
For sure. Yeah. So we've one of the half doors are almost done. We have the design is done. We're tooling up the panels that go on the outside. So that's going to be one of the options that are available. We also plan a full enclosure side option. I think of it a lot like a Jeep. If the weather is super nasty, you put the sides on. If it's lovely outside, it's a lot of fun to drive them with them off. Although I've driven mine all winter long here in Oregon, where it's been raining and cold, and the fairing keeps you remarkably dry. And it's even on a nasty day, I find it to be a very pleasurable thing to drive around open and getting that in the world experience that you just don't get in a car. And particularly when you compare it to other modes of transport, like the guys riding their bicycles in the driving down rain and have tons of rain gear on. In my case, I would just wear a jacket, whatever it took to walk around outside. That's what you wear, and you stay warm and stay dry. So we've definitely had a lot of people ask about full enclosure, but we've also had a number of folks say, once they've actually experienced the vehicle, say that that's not necessary. But it's certainly something that we're planning on offering and are making real progress on.
Now, I was watching Gally over on Hyperchange. He interviewed you a few days ago, and you were talking about a referral program. I know that you guys have started it, and we've got a referral code for Now You Know. He's got one for Hyperchange. And I think Gally and us are probably doing a little friendly wager on who can get to the most referrals first. I heard you mention something like maybe 100 referrals would get an Arcimoto. We would be dying to do something like that to get ourselves in one.
I love that competition. Want you guys to keep it up. That's everybody wins in that competition. But yeah, so we're thinking that if somebody uses a referral code, they'll get a benefit like a bag of Arcimoto gear, that'll come for free or some options up or something. And then whoever does the referring is also going to get a benefit. And I think 100 vehicles seems like 100 referrals to get an Arcimoto of your own seems like a reasonable one. And you guys have been remarkably successful with referrals, if I recall correctly. So definitely want you on the team. And I should say we are still very hard at work at the moment. We're all working from home. I'm in my backyard at the moment, but even though the production line is paused, we've got a ton of work ongoing on engineering materials and of course getting our fleet products out there into the world for testing. So we are very much looking forward to getting back up and running on the production side as well. But trying to make very good use of the time that we have now to really move forward, get real yardage on some of those critical initiatives. And likewise, thanks for having me on the program again. Hope you guys are staying safe and healthy, and look forward to seeing what comes out of your garage.
Jesse, when we were at Fully Charged Live in Austin, we were doing a forum panel, and someone asked a question about, well, you guys are excited about Tesla, but is there anybody else out there? And we pointed to Arcimoto, who is the back at the room, with the fun utility vehicle. And we're like, how about that company? They are doing exactly what Tesla is doing. They're making all electric cars. They don't make anything but electric vehicles.
Right. Yeah, I think that it's just a really exciting company. I mean, you could imagine for a moment that they were coming out with a gas version of the same looking vehicle. It would be loud. It would be smelly. No one would want to have this on their campuses. No one would want to have this, it would just be like, ugh. Having it be electric is such a big difference. And Arcimoto is one of the leading companies in this space.
Right. The other thing is, I invest in Arcimoto. I'm public about that. And one of the reasons is not just because they're making electric vehicles. There's a lot of companies out there that do. I also invest in the leaders of companies. And this is something I didn't really want to say on my interview with Mark because I didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable, but he's a great leader. Mm-hmm. Look at what's happened in the world right now, and he was able to pivot very quickly, make sure that they've gotten onto new product lines, make sure that the company is safe, that they're still working hard, and that's the kind of leader you want running a company. And so that's why I'm long on Arcimoto.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this interview with Mark Frohnmayer, the president of Arcimoto. If you liked it, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We talk with Mark from time to time, so if this interests you, definitely subscribe. And we also have lots of other interesting content. We hope to see you next time.
Now you know.